Hello and welcome to the Guna Fanzine Arsenal Woman podcast. I would say it's the end of the season. I usually would, but there is one more to go, of course, in Lisbon. But Arsenal wrapped up their WSL season with a 4-3 win over Manchester United. 25 goals in the Arsenal's last four games, Daisy. I mean, it's not been great for your heart rate, has it, watching this team in the last few weeks, whether it's Lyon or on paper, less important games, but the goals have been flying in. And you have to say Saturday was important and it got nervy at the end, and Arsenal did well to get over the line. And I thought it was a fair result, to be honest. I don't think Manchester United quite offered enough to really draw or win the game, but it's been a crazy few weets.
Yeah, it's been very up and down. Like I say, the highest of the highs, and then going to Villa and Crawley and seeing that kind of quick, not disappointment. That's well, a little bit of disappointment, but also just the way everything could change so quickly in football. Obviously, Arsenal have a big game coming up that we're going to probably talk about a lot in the next week or so. But I think Arsenal needed that performance more than they needed kind of the result. They knew obviously a draw would secure them second place. I think second place is an important. People are looking at it like, oh, if we finish third, it doesn't matter so much. I think news. I was spreading news around the pub that if Arsenal win the Champions League, they can get a spot in the group stage or something like that. But that was when I was before the game, when I didn't realise they were going to come out and perform like that. I mean, at one point being 4-1 up against Manchester United, it was just crazy. Obviously, two goals conceded towards the end, kind of a little bit of a shame, really, because it didn't represent, I thought, the way that Arsenal played for majority of that game, especially that 10 to 15 minute period after half time where they just came out and they just took the game by storm. But they were great from the get-go defensively. Obviously, by the mistakes, much better. Zinsberger had a really good game compared to obviously what we've been saying defensively about them in the previous two matches, and also just Arsenal playing the free flowing football that we saw at Lyon, that we saw. We know René Slager's René Slager's team can do. So yeah, fantastic game, and I just thought it sets really the tone for what Arsenal want to be doing, going into such a big game in Lisbon.
Hmm. Arsenal's highest goal scoring season now since 2021-22. They've scored more goals than Chelsea, but they've conceded double the amount of Chelsea, and a lot of those coming in the last week or so. I guess the first thing I want to touch on is at 4-1 up, I turned to Izzy. We were in the press box together, and I said game over. And I said, that's second place, game over. Thanks for coming, blah, blah, blah. At 4-3, she's turning around and giving me a bit back and saying, why on earth did you say that? And that's the first time I think I've seen René Slagers that frustrated on the touchline. I thought that was interesting. I think the two goals that go in are really McCabe mistakes, and I think she's been overplayed. I think she's, with the USA international, one of the best players, I think the best player in some awards, or the best, was it the best rookie in the NWSL in 2023 in Jenna Niswonger? Someone will correct me on that. Arsenal, it's not like with right back where Arsenal don't have a right back to replace Emily Fox. They do have a more than capable left back to replace Jenna Niswonger. And I've just got to say, Arsenal got themselves in a bit of bother in that game. Katie McCabe's really struggled since Lyon, and I just don't quite understand how she's been managed or not by René Slagers, because that nearly did make for a very nervy ending, those two mistakes, and I'm reluctant to pin it all on the player, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rene's obviously made some good decisions and also some, ones that you could maybe argue weren't the best. I think squad rotation's obviously been a big concern, and especially following Lyon. She rotated basically the entire squad and made a lot of changes for Villa, and then obviously maybe that scared her a little bit that we were able to lose in that nature. But then again, obviously to go to Brighton, bring the main team back and still lose. And I think even at Villa, there were moments that Katie was shaky straight after the second half. Obviously made that mistake that led to the Villa's third goal, I think it was, in the game. And then you see it again. And then Jenna came on against Brighton, and we, in the crowd and reading online as well after, were so impressed with her performance. She hasn't had much game time. She hasn't had much of a chance to make an impression, which a lot of the players really haven't, that have been on the bench, and that's something that Rene's got to work on. But I just thought she came on at Brighton. She was taking players on. She was putting fantastic crosses in the box. In a game like that, we know Manchester United are dangerous. Of course they were, but I don't really think United tested them too much defensively as we thought they would. And it could have been a great opportunity for Jenna to kind of have another chance to impress. I would have liked to have seen more from her. And there was potentially more room for earlier substitutions and more rotation as Arsenal going, like you say, 4-1 up. You start to think, okay, maybe this is the time to make those changes. And I think she delayed that a little bit. I think Kadina played about 30 seconds, which
Yeah.
was interesting as well. So maybe that is a criticism that we could have in that game. But there's no doubt, the players have played a lot of minutes. It's those moments are going to happen. It is going to be tough, but we were starting to get a little bit nervous that it might have ended up finishing a draw. And I don't think a draw, like you say, would have been a fair result. That would be the disappointment. Obviously, we know a draw would have secured a second, but it wouldn't have been that really. That would have been the frustrating part. It would have been the fact that we were winning so comfortably, and then obviously to go on and concede so many and basically give away the win would have been even more disappointing, especially on the back of the other two results that we had before that.
Yeah, Laia Cadena came in for Amanda Ilestedt on the bench. So Ilestedt, Hurtig, Goldie. Obviously, I think Goldie could have played actually because London City's season was done. There was no sort of fairy tale endings to Arsenal careers. There were no sympathetic runouts. It was actually I don't know if Ilestedt was injured. I presume not, but Cadena, brought back in. Woodman Moy came on and Catley moved to left back. I think we forget that as well. Steph Catley, before this season is mostly a left back. So aren't there? Katie McCabe's been brilliant. The reason she's played so much recently and all season is because of how well she's done. But I just think, there's a couple of areas across the pitch where maybe the amount of minutes and the legs of some of these Arsenal players, just where you don't really want it to be catching up. And obviously, with 2 weeks to go now, before the final, this is a good bit of recovery time and getting that, combination right, the balance right between recovery and also training and working on things to build up for Barcelona. I think this is crucial, and Arsenal will make the most of these 2 weeks on the training ground. But there were definitely tired legs out there, and I think the first half in particular, it was, I can't believe how sort of much the second half went off in Arsenal's favour because the first half I was talking to people at half time and we were just saying, these teams that with no disrespect to either side, they were just going through the motions. It felt like, it was 1-1 at half time, and it didn't feel like two teams really battling for second place. It didn't feel like United had really come to try and win the game. We know they're a good defensive side, but the difference in the two halves was staggering. What were your thoughts at half time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went in slightly early. It was a really, really, really hot day, I thought, at the Emirates. We were, really struggling down there. So I went in about 37, and at that point I had every feeling that the game was probably going to still be a draw at half time. And going into the second half, I'd not even got back when that penalty call was given. Potentially, you could argue either way about that, but I think it really gave, Arsenal came out straight away and had a point to prove. I think it was United who needed to go out in that second half and have that really good first 10, 15 minutes. They're the ones who know they have to win the game. Arsenal looking at this thinking, well, we want to perform well, we want to obviously get the win every single week, but it was United's to take, and I don't think they really did. I mean, just going back to the first goal that Arsenal scored, Tullis Joyce making a mistake just doesn't happen. I've watched her all season,
Yeah.
I've praised her all season. It did not feel like a United side that you were used to watching. They had moments of strength, don't get me wrong, but they obviously got a really good set piece goal, and then they were gifted two goals by mistakes, which they capitalised on. But it was not the United side that you would expect. Grace Clinton had that shot Manu saved, so I just thought it was Arsenal who really came and showed, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to play. And after that, the floodgates kind of opened, and it seemed like United kind of crumbled a little bit, and Arsenal were able to play through them so easily, and such a good defence as well. Like
Mm.
United have not conceded so many goals. They've had a lot of. I think Tullis Joyce was up there with clean sheets, wasn't she? Because she took home the Golden Glove. So interesting that United then concede four. Um,
Mm.
but that's just credit to Arsenal saying, actually, we're going to take this game. Mariona finishing the penalty, and then from then, I kind of just knew. I think Arsenal were going to score more, and United weren't going to get back into it. But I was a bit sort of surprised that United didn't come out and try and take the game by the scruff of its neck and get the win that they definitely could have got if they'd have put that fight in.
Yeah, a scrappy game. 30 fouls, and I thought it was refereed really poorly. In a few circumstances, not least the Celine Bizet bringing down the ball with her hand and somehow the referee missing that. But yeah, United were without Jade Riviere and Aoife Mannion, so they sort of switched to a back five. Celine Bizet, right wing back, Leticia Turner and Janssen. Janssen's played a lot of the season, I think, in midfield. And I think that did allow Arsenal to open them up a little bit more, sort of on the transition down the flanks. And, it's not a formation United have had most of their success in. They've been quite a regimented sort of back four, 4-2-3-1 from what I've seen of them this season. And from what I've always seen of them this season, Tillis Joyce, as you say, has been up there, possibly, probably the best goalkeeper in the WSL. I think she's been so good. And there was disbelief, really, because it was such a bad mistake, and perhaps United, they'd celebrated getting their European football. Second would have been great, but I think second was worth more for Arsenal because Arsenal have had that heartbreak of going out in that qualifying stage, whereas United are almost just happy to be there. They're happy to be in with a shot of getting into the Champions League group stage. This constitutes a very good season for them, finishing above Manchester City. They've still got an FA Cup final. But they do get back into the game. Ella Toone with a header. I think it was Millie Turner at the first knockdown. Arsenal set piece defending. There's a bit of one club mentality again here because it's been a bit of a worry. And again, Toone, who loves a goal against Arsenal, this wasn't great marking. I think sort of Steph Catley lost her. Almost typical of Manu Zinsberger to make a world-class save in the top corner. And then she probably should have done better to keep this one out as well.
Yeah, I think it's been a problem for Arsenal. I've been noticing this more. I mean, there was the Brighton one where it fell on the edge of the box to I think it was Kankovic, and she then slotted that in. And then I've been watching more and more and just realizing we're not winning those first or second balls. And when you want, your goalkeeper to be of confidence, like you say, she's just made that save. We're trying to, but the crowd behind, we're trying to get behind the team. But I just can't explain it. But I felt watching that as they went to take that corner, I kind of knew that the goal was coming, and I think to be honest, I don't really think Manu was to blame so much. I think Arsenal should be doing better winning sort of the duels, the aerial duels, kind of being first when the ball's loose in the box. I think it's happened too many times this season. It's probably obviously something that Rene is going to be aware of, but Arsenal don't have a lot of kind of big players, do they? They don't have that kind of aerial presence that they used to. Not playing Ilestedt so much. Obviously, they had Rafa before. I do think that's kind of cost Arsenal a little bit in winning those balls. But Toone's not the tallest of players, and she's got to that as well. So it's interesting. But obviously, it's got to be something big on the bigger issue of defensive problems that Arsenal have got. Rene talked about the transition as well being a major issue compared to last. If you look at last season where we didn't concede so many goals on the counter because we were Morley, Avolti, players who are defensive minded. Now we've kind of switched to having that Kim Little Mariona, which works great when Arsenal want to build up and play through the middle of the park and move the ball quickly. But I've noticed that it costs Arsenal, especially with the fullbacks high as well, when they get the ball in the transition, and then obviously it's from set pieces as well. So it's definitely part of the bigger picture that Arsenal have got to solve in terms of defending, because it's going to cost them big games and it's going to cost them points. And if they actually want to challenge, no matter who you bring in recruitment wise, you've got to kind of fix these issues. And it's a big part of the problem that Rene Slager has got to solve.
Yeah, it's just hard, isn't it? Because I think the last few weeks after beating Leon, we've watched the last few weeks through the lens of if we play like this against Barcelona.
Yeah.
And I think, there's this knowledge that even if Arsenal are incredible against Barcelona, they've got to be even more. They have to be perfect, to beat Barcelona and win the Champions League. And there are obviously circumstances as to why these games and these mistakes are creeping in, as we talked about. We know a team is not going to turn up at Villa away as they might in the Champions League final when they've just reached that Champions League final. But yeah, it's hard to keep that Barcelona game out of the back of your mind. And as we say, 4-1, 3 goals in I think 12 minutes, which happens so often under Rene Slagers. I did go and properly count it up, but this just keeps happening. The goals in quick succession. I mean, if you could do that against Barcelona, then you are in dreamland. Ford foul by Clinton. Again, Caitlin Ford, very impactful. I've got to talk about Mariona's penalty taking. I was on Radio London the other week and they were saying, oh, there's no better penalty taker at the moment. And I said, well, I do remember we were both there, Liverpool away. She hit the post, but she is so composed on the spot. And I think I saw a tweet saying that she just looks at the goalkeeper. She doesn't even look at the ball. She does it Ivan Toney style, which makes it even more impressive because if I tried that, I'd probably miss the ball altogether. But that, and then the Kim Little, the Frida Marnham goal. I love the Frida Marnham goal. The fact that she sort of picked it up, gave the ball back to McCabe, made that run across into the box. It was such a calm finish. And then Kim Little, she's been given a bit more room to roam forward, hasn't she, in recent months? And she took the goal really well. She's such a popular player with her teammates. But your assessments on how Arsenal, well, I say took the game away from United. They did until they allowed United back into it, but another very impressive sort of salvo of goals.
Yeah, definitely. And it's even when when we went to Leon, I think those goals that came before we could even get back to our seats. It seems to be a thing that Rene not only scoring multiple goals in quick succession, but also scoring straight after half time. I don't know, like you say, that's probably something we need to look at and actually get the stats up there. But I think we must have scored quite a few goals in that first. Like that was when the Mariona and the Russo goal against Leon were scored at exactly the same time because one just before and one kind of just after. But yeah, definitely. I think the Kim Little one was probably my favourite just because we've been saying all season from the crowd shoo every time she gets the ball and she takes that pretty much first time. It's something we haven't seen a lot. I don't think we've seen a lot of that specific finish from Kim in a while, and that was kind of nice to see because we know what she can do. She's used to score a lot more goals kind of from the edge of the box, and we spoke about this too because I think it's something she hasn't done. But like you say, getting forward, I think it allowed her and Marnham to go further forward, probably because United were missing kind of that presence in midfield that allowed Arsenal more freedom. And Chloe Kelly, I thought, was excellent at making that happen. Cutting inside, allowing the space for Kim to find space in the box, and from Marnham to obviously link up with McCabe as well. It's really nice to see those different partnerships and nice to see the team kind of working together and just gelling in the perfect way. But yeah, Mariona's penalties are such an interesting one for me because as much as I think she's incredible and I trust her, I get so scared every time, and I don't know if it's just the how slow of a penalty it is. If you watch her, she kind of creeps up on it,
Yeah.
tiptoes towards it, and I've been thinking about every time Chloe Kelly picks the ball up, as part of the psychological side. I think, oh, here she goes, she's going to take one of her signature penalties, and obviously Chloe's penalties are so different. She smashes it as hard as she can, and Mariona kind of just says, well, no matter where you go, I'm going to find a way to slot it in. I think the Bayern one was nervy because the goalkeeper actually got a finger on it and kind of put it in the net.
Mm.
So it's kind of interesting. She goes for that kind of bottom corner. I'm going to give away all of her tactics now, but she slots it in either corner, but she never kind of makes a big deal of it. She just steps up nice and slow and takes it. But it just shows what kind of player she is, doesn't it? That's just Mariona summed up really. So good in the big moments and doesn't really seem to feel pressure. But I think the pressure might hit her and me if she has to do that in the final. So let's not kind of cause that. There'll be a oh, you missed on purpose kind of thing coming up as a
Yeah,
Barcelona fan. But yeah.
that that reunion is gonna be really interesting. There's a fast bowler for the West Indies who was called Michael Holding, and his nickname was Whispering Death because he'd sort of shuffle in and you'd never sort of hear him coming, and then he'd bowl incredibly quickly and sort of catch people out. But he was sort of known for that sort of the unassuming run in, but then would always be clinical. And I think you could compare that to Mariona. I
Yeah.
agree. I'd much rather see someone step back 10 yards, run up and hit it as hard as they can, but. Yeah, it's not the done thing anymore. And United do get back in the game, but Arsenal only needed a draw. As I say, United didn't really offer. Turlin obviously comes on and scores, gets lucky with the deflection, but Arsenal make their own mess. Nelson and Awujo come on as well. United didn't really have a lot to bring off the bench and threaten Arsenal. How nervy was it in the stands? Because, watching back, they didn't really create a lot in the end, and it felt like both teams, the race was run.
Yeah, I think like the confidence probably came from the fact, like you say, Arsenal knowing and us knowing in the crowd that Arsenal only needed the draw. I think it definitely got nervy to the point where I thought this may end up in a draw. United not quite doing enough, but Arsenal obviously losing the win, which probably wouldn't have been good for their confidence, even though it would have still secured second place. Like I say, it was about getting the win. I think United, had they've got strong players, doing, I think May Letizia every single week shows up. That penalty from a centre, I haven't watched a lot of her penalties, but I was informed that she does take them, which I didn't really know. And, certain players definitely showed up and definitely performed really well. And then as a team, I just think they were missing the same drive and determination that Arsenal were, like I mentioned earlier. And I think maybe that helped our nerves in the crowd. That the referee didn't help though, adding 7 minutes on. I don't know where she got that from, but she didn't help the nerves at all in that sense. But I think we kind of knew, even if it did end a draw, it would have been disappointing. But we'd kind of gone 4-1 up and that was second place, kind of done and dusted, just maybe a little bit nervy towards when they started to get those goals going in. And yeah, I think really it was always Arsenal's.
Yeah, it's almost a game that sort of sums up Arsenal's season, sort of the good and the bad, sort of sums up Arsenal under Rene Slagers. They can really turn it on when they want to, but it's just about, there are these mistakes in certain areas. After the game, I was telling Izzy because I was at Meadow Park. I think we all were last year when, Miedema said goodbye, did her speech, and that atmosphere, that quite I always compare the Miedema decision to Brexit, and now it sort of split the fan base down the middle, and it was a really tense atmosphere at Meadow Park last year. None of the like for Amanda Ilestedt, Lina Hurtig, and Teyah Goldie. Sort of a really nice moment, actually, all of them coming and saying goodbye. I feel like all three players have gone through a lot off the pitch, sort of for good and for bad. Lina Hurtig, I really hope she has some better luck, injury wise and whatever else has been going on at her next club, because I just feel so sorry for her. Amanda has been a lovely story. I think you can see how her teammates have paid tribute to her on social media. They're particularly inspired, I think, by what she's gone through. And then Teyah literally came back from one ACL injury, got one in the other leg, and now she's helped London City to promotion. This is a guess, but I'd be shocked if she doesn't stay permanently at London City. So moves for all three that makes sense, and I just hope they all can go and get regular football.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of expecting, probably if we're being realistic, expecting all three. I wasn't sure how Arsenal would manage the Teyah situation, but I think, like you say, it makes total sense. I think right now I don't see how she would. It's not the right time, and sometimes, unfortunately, that is how football goes, and it's harder with those players that like have been there since they were kids, and obviously she's a Gooner, she loves Arsenal, so it is tougher with those decisions. But I think it makes complete sense, and we obviously wish her the best that she can go and play that football that she needs. She talked about how happy she's been to be able to play football and be able to get those minutes, especially like you say, coming back from injuries and not having much luck there. I really enjoyed the Ilestedt journey, and I think obviously beyond that, like you say, like her being pregnant and going through that, and the baby being there, and just showing kind of that other side of football. It's not just about um the performances, but also the bigger story. But at the same time, she scored against Chelsea. She got us that goal. I think it was Southampton. I always remember that nervy, awful game that we had in the Conti Cup or whatever it was. But she's definitely still done what she was brought in to do with Arsenal. I think it was never going to be kind of a go on forever thing. I always go back to Rafa and I'm like, that was just such a
Mhm.
great story and happened so quickly. And I kind of see similarities in that with Ilestedt. She did what she was brought in to do, and she's clearly enjoyed her time at the club as well. And Lina was just, I think it was an unlucky one. I love that people were saying, obviously, about that goal that she scored at Juventus this season has basically
Yeah,
got Arsenal to the Champions League, and I think that's a nice way to see it. And there's it's a bit of a shame it didn't work out just because the nature of her coming in, promising player. Arsenal paid a lot of money for her at the time, and I just think it's a shame, but that is kind of how how football goes. And it was the right time, I think, for Arsenal to say, well, that's just not worked out. But no real surprises yet. From the transfer, and obviously it's not even opened yet, and it's early days, but we will kind of see how that goes. But yeah, it was great to have them like coming at the Emirates as well, obviously representing Arsenal being at the Emirates, and then obviously getting the awards, and Renee speaking and getting all emotional and making us emotional. So it was really nice to kind of have that, and yeah, just to be able to have that connection with those players, and also obviously with the players that are staying, and with Renee as well.
yeah. I couldn't work out if Renee was emotional or if she didn't quite know how to use a microphone.
Yeah,
Sort of doing that shouting, and I was sitting there going, Renee, it'll do that for you. You just
yeah,
have to talk normally. But yeah, she sort of me and Leif were talking about it afterwards because she was going, we stay humble, we're focused on the final, and then she went, but we go there to win, and
yeah.
everyone was like, yes. It was like a speech, at the start of a battle. It was amazing. But yeah, Lina, and I've got to say as well, Lina and Amanda could still play, in the Champions League final. I still very much stand by that, if you need to lump across into the box, if you want someone in there, could Lina Hurtig get the
Lina
fair
Hurtig winner in
ending?
the final would just be too
Yeah.
much for us, I
I
think.
mean, it could still happen. Teyah less so. The thing with Teyah, I think she's almost been unlucky in many ways, but the player who's almost there in her place is Katie Reed. I think once sort of talk got around about how promising Katie Reed was, and then during that time, Teyah had those ACL injuries. I think she's almost overtaken her, which is testament to Katie Reed. But yeah, sure we'll be seeing Teyah in the WSL next season with London City, and then Mariona sweeping the awards. She may continue to do so when we put out our Guna Fanzine awards, without giving away any spoilers. The Supporters Club Player of the Season, and then the Arsenal Player of the Season as voted for by the supporters. But I don't know if you know how the Supporters Club one works, but that was a nice touch to have those fans sort of presenting it to her. But and then the inaugural Women's Professional Game Awards as well, where she was there, Renee was there, Russo shared the Golden Boot, Mariona. Voted again by the fans, all the fans of every club, of the WSL Player of the Year. Um, that's quite the accolade, isn't it? That's sort of a clean sweep. I know Alessia Russo got the Football Writers one, but I can withhold my own opinions on that. But Mariona, I think that says it all. That's the recognition, when you're getting the league's player of the season voted for by the fans of all the clubs. She has been something else, and we'll touch more on her before Barcelona and in our own awards as well. But the deserved recognition, I feel, for her.
Yeah, definitely. And I was like looking back at one of the podcasts we did when we knew Arsenal were pretty much there with signing her, and we said, if Arsenal can get it right with the position of Mariona, then she'll be a fantastic player. Did I know that we'd be sitting here in this situation with her? No. But it wasn't just what I think she exceeded our expectations of what we thought she could do. It hasn't just been the goals, it hasn't just been the assists, it's been the constant performance. I mean, she didn't win a somebody said to me she didn't win a player of the month. And if was that for Arsenal or something, she didn't win one, and she's gone and taken the biggest of them all. So I think that just shows kind of the fans love her, rival fans love her. I saw Chelsea fans, I saw City fans commenting on the post saying well deserved. She's a lovely person. I think she's picked up the language and the culture really well. Like all of a sudden, I think she's just seems to have settled in. She seems like she belongs here, and obviously it must have been difficult for her leaving a club that she supports, and she played at for 10 years, but it couldn't have gone to a better person. And I think the supporters club one. I saw the results that they posted. It was about 48% Mariona, 23% Russo, and a smaller percentage for Fox. So it was really, really. Hopefully, I can say that, but that wasn't a public group chat, so I'm hoping it's not, private knowledge. But I think it just shows like she stormed everything for a reason. People are respecting her for what she does beyond scoring goals. She's, as people have put it, she has taken Arsenal to another level, and she's changed that side. And I remember saying, watching that United game, like, God, if we hadn't have had Mariona, we might have been looking at sixth. We might have been looking at going in the group. We might have been looking at just beyond obviously bringing Renee in. I think having Mariona has benefited the team. And if you were to look to one person that you wanna keep and you want to build a team around, it's probably Mariona. But like you said, we will probably keep going on and on and on about that going into such a huge game against a team that I know is so familiar to her. They'll probably be getting all the tips and advice from her right now.
Yeah, I mean, that is, as much as we joke about it, it is very handy. Actually having her, I can't imagine when she signed, maybe someone joked going, "Oh, you never know, might see you in the Champions League final," and she would have been like, "Well, we've got about a million rounds of qualifying to get through
Yeah.
first," during which she was instrumental. But yeah, 48%, that's a big margin actually, when you put that onto the supporters group. And yeah, as you say, I mean, I've seen Chelsea fans, Chelsea journalists, all sorts of people saying, it's a good decision. And I think the Football Writers one, I think every journalist sort of, if they cover the Premier League, if they cover the WSL, they all vote. And, so there may be some, for example, who cover mostly the Premier League and could look up, and look, not to take anything away from those journalists and Alessia Russo, of course, as well. But I think if you watch the WSL week in, week out, I think Mariona is going to be right up there. Just finally, as well, I broke the news finally this week. I've had this one sort of on the go. I think people who have sort of followed my under 21s coverage will have seen the name Jessie Gale a lot. I've had a lot of people commenting, going, "Oh, professional contract," and I've had to sort of keep quiet. But there's not one but two. My exclusive, as I understand, Jessie Gale and Cecily Wellesley Smith are set to sign professional contracts. Gale joined from Charlton Athletic last year, has scored regularly for Arsenal under 21s, England under 17s and under 19s. and Watford as well. She had a really successful time of it at Watford. Cecily Wellesley-Smith spent the last couple of seasons playing senior football. She's only turned 18 recently. Both of them have made their England under 19 debuts this season. And Wellesley-Smith as well was in the England under 17 World Cup squad. She's very tall. She's got that similar sort of build to a Katie Reid, which can be massive at that age. So two players expected to come through and sign professional contracts this summer. Always exciting. We touched off air about Michelle Agyemang, but looks like Arsenal in Jessie Gale of another young striker coming through.
Yeah, definitely. It's always exciting. I think obviously it was playing a huge role in Arsenal, in the history of the club and beyond that. I think it's something that Arsenal will have to kind of prioritise going forward as well. Like there's been a lot of maybe criticism a little bit or a little bit of kind of talk about the fact that often it hasn't worked out with a lot of the players that have come up through Arsenal. Maybe they haven't have relied on their younger players as much as the likes of Chelsea have. But I'm really excited for to see these players coming up. I've heard a lot about Jessie Gale. I haven't watched a lot. Obviously, it's hard to catch up with every level of football, but I'm super excited to kind of see how Arsenal manage that. Obviously Michelle as well. I think Brighton have said kind of thank you to her. I don't know if that's just a case of her going back because the loan's up and Arsenal have got to decide what happens next, but lots of key players coming through, and I think it's just exciting to see, and I think it. Arsenal have obviously got to make a lot of decisions about a lot of the players. I was thinking that actually, they've got the likes of I think Layla Harbert, Maddie Earl, etc., who have also got to. It's always that point that we talk about when we talk about transfer window, where we go, right, what do we do with all of these young players and these loan players, and do we send them off again? And what point do you bring them back? And I think Katie Reid's probably the one that's standing out to us at the moment, just because she's one of the few that's been able to get an opportunity to stay with the club and to have minutes. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting sort of summer and obviously going forward into next season to see how these players come through, and obviously how Renee manages that as well, because she's got an older squad, I would say, and now she's got to kind of decide and see more of these players that are coming back and have been on loan. So it's going to be really interesting in that sense, and I hope Arsenal can manage to get a few more players to come through, a bit like your Leah Williamsons and things like that, players getting more of an opportunity.
Yeah, the under 21s as well. Obviously won the league. They also won the Capital Cup last night, beating a senior side in Dulwich Hamlet. They won 2-0. Gabby Dimmock and Izzy Fisher, and I think that was Fisher's final game for the club. My understanding is she's being released, and Arsenal missed a penalty in the first half. They also had to play the last 15 down to 10 players as well. They only had two subs, and a player went off injured because they can't use under 16s in the final because the FA rules say if they're playing against senior players. And Arsenal had a lot of under 16, so they're only able to fill a couple of subs. So a very, very good season actually for Arsenal's academy. I think the under 16s won a tournament as well. I think I saw something about that. So yeah, exciting times. Just finally, we'll put a link to this. Some of you will have seen on social media already, but Daisy is putting together a survey for fans to give their thoughts and feelings about Renee Slagers. If your responses are successful, we will grant her a contract. No, only joking. But Daisy, tell us a little bit more about the survey and how people can get involved.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the reason I wanted to write this, I think they're always interesting when we kind of reach out to the people who have watched the season as much as we have. The fans have played such a huge part in it, and I think the big talking point of the season is obviously going to have been Renee Slagers. And I thought the best way to kind of do that is to put together a few different questions on a Google form. So you've got things like how did you rate the season? What players do you think kind of she's got the best out of and maybe not the best out of? Leave comments about kind of her season and how she's done and what the future looks like and things like that. So I think it's a perfect opportunity if you want to get involved. I'm looking to get around 100 fans. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of get a consensus and pick out sort of keywords and things like that. But it's super easy. It takes 2 minutes. It's on a Google form. We'll probably link it in the description. But you can choose to keep it anonymous, or if you do want to put your name in, I may pick out kind of key things that people have said and use that. So if you do want to be involved, there's a chance to feature in the article, and it will be out obviously on the Gooner hopefully very soon once I've kind of got the responses in over the next couple of days and put it together. But I'm kind of looking forward to reading what everyone's said. It's looking positive so far, but there's definitely some kind of general ideas that people have shared. So if you want to get involved, it'll be a really interesting piece to see what people have thought of Renee Slager's first season. I say first season, but she's obviously missed quite a bit of it. But yeah, first proper season, I guess, in charge.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Interesting bit of journalism, actually, not something I see a lot in terms of using that approach. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what people come back with. As I say, the link is in the description of this podcast. Daisy, we will reconvene next week for a bit more of an in-depth Barcelona preview. I'm hoping to get a couple of guests on as well. We've got a bit of that Barcelona insight. We'll have a load of preview content as well. Adam Salter has written a six-part series about Arsenal's only so far European Cup win, about that final over Umea, the Alex Scott goal. Kelly Smith as well being sent off in the semi-final. I've just been editing it. It's really, really interesting insight. They went straight from the final to the Emirates to celebrate and were out on the pitch at halftime during a men's game. And they actually turned down the opportunity to play the final at the Emirates because they were more suited to Meadow Park. I'm not going to spoil it all, but I think you know Adam as well,
Yeah.
and the level of research is unbelievable. It's an incredible amount of detail. So that'll be out. We're going to have a sort of, it's a six-parter. We're going to have a part every day from Sunday to take us all the way up to Saturday, and then the final as well, so you can relive all of that. And as I say, a really, really good bit of writing. So Daisy, we'll see you next week. We'll try and catch you before you head off to Lisbon because you're going early.
Yeah, I'm going on the Wednesday, so I'm sure to be fair, I'll be out there. I'm probably going to take my laptop as well because I want to try and get as much content as we can while we're out there. It's obviously, a nice 5 day trip, but hopefully see a little bit of the city. But obviously, the main event is that match. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading Adam's piece as well. He, like you said, he does a lot of work. I think you can view it on his socials, Arsenal Women Archive, because he posts pretty much every single day some kind of throwback from an Arsenal game. He's trying to basically make it so every piece of history, him and others as well, so every piece of history is there for you to see, and it's great work for the women's game in general and for curious, Arsenal women's fans who want to learn more about the history of the club. So definitely worth checking out. But yeah, looking forward to Lisbon, and I'm sure plenty more content to come from us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think for a sport, in terms of women's football in the UK, and for a club like Arsenal, it's had such a swell of new supporters and new people interested in it in the last few years. I think going to this level to detail the history and sort of helping people fill in their knowledge about it, I think it's really, 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 really important to make it accessible. So yeah, exciting times, as you say, loads of content to come next week before the final, and I'll catch you in Lisbon.
Yeah, looking forward to it.